Hi, this is Dr. Mark Sehl from the YouTube channel Therapy for the Heart. And I was cut off last time. I didn't have enough room in my camera. So I'm back again. This is part two. And we're talking about the ego's defenses of the mind and how they help and how they interfere with our lives. So we're going to talk somewhat about what we can do about those defenses. We can't do too much about what's really unconscious because we're not aware of it, but we can do other things. So I'll touch on some of the defenses I didn't touch on before. So reaction formation. Reaction formation is a defense to handle unacceptable impulses like a rage at someone or disappointment in someone and resulting anger or hurt. So if you're at work and somebody is constantly reminding you that you're late or hogging the machine, the Xerox machine, and doesn't give you or anyone else room, you could sidle up to them and be overly friendly. But that's fake. It may work sometimes, but why not be direct and say to them, by the way, I noticed that you're taking a lot of the time on the Xerox machine or the copier, and I'd like you to save some time for me, and I'd like to have equal time for that. Or I notice when you come into the office, you often have some critical things or sarcastic things, and that's very repetitive. So please refrain from doing that. Many people, it's concealed, their aggression and displeasure is concealed very handily by being overly friendly, but you can usually sense it's not genuine. So there's displacement. Displacement is taking a feeling and putting it on a substitute if you're uncomfortable with the feeling. Like it could be sexual feelings. Some people are very uncomfortable with them, so they might develop a fetish, a foot fetish. So that's displacement of their feelings, sexual feelings, when they find it very uncomfortable and judgmental about them and anxious about them. Displacement also can be seen in putting it on a person that you care about, or taking it from a person that you're caring about, not from, because usually you want to remove yourself from people who you're afraid of offending with your anger, or usually anger. So you could have an argument with somebody at work and then go home and yell at your wife or kick the dog. Well, that's displacement. So let's see. So what you can do about these defenses, we'll go along and see if there is something to do, but you could note them. I recommend noting them if you can see them and observe them. Of course, there's a conflict, unconscious and conscious, but if you can have some consciousness of what you're doing and you see some dismay at yourself by behaving in a way that's not good for you or for others, you can note them, write them down, and pay attention to them and work on them. If you see yourself always being overly friendly, and check it out in your mind and say, well, this is not really how I feel, you can do something about that. Rationalization is another way to not be genuine about your feelings. Like if you're late all the time for someone or appointments, and I wasn't feeling well. How many times are you going to be saying I wasn't feeling well, I had sore throat, or when you don't show up for something? And people sometimes habitually and characterologically are late for things. So that's not a very good. It's a way to get around your behavior, but I think people see through it sometimes. So why not just be direct and say, well, I really had some anxiety about coming to the meeting today, and I was tempted to come late, but I didn't. That's pretty direct. Oh, you don't want to reveal you have anxiety? Well, we're all human. Everybody has anxiety. Acting out is another example of a defense against putting something into words. So people who drink often have this inclination to drink at people if you're angry or hurt by your spouse. So the thought would go, I'll show you. Also, nobody cares. Who cares if I drink or not? So I'll show you. So I'll have another drink at you. So it's really drinking at your partner or whoever is disappointing you. So you need to be able to learn to feel comfortable with putting things into words. And that's why you have me. But if you don't have me, you can note these things and write them down. Writing things down makes them real. You know, it's like I suggested to many people that I work with that they write it down. They just came out with some short study about how people who are imposters, it helps them by writing down all the things that they think make them imposters in the world, and also or ingenuine or fake. Yeah. Writing down is very, very helpful. Sublimating is another defense. It's a much less destructive defense than some of the others. Sublimation, you take a wish, some wish that you find is unacceptable, and you turn it into a work product. So you can writing a book is a very good one. You can sublimate your desires into writing. Change them in a form that they're somewhat disguised. Writing a book is like having a baby. So you can be with a colleague or a friend and you say, okay, let's write a book about this. And your impulse is really you want to connect with them on an emotional, romantic level. But you decide rather than propose that and make yourself vulnerable, you say, well, maybe we write a book together. Yeah. That's a neat way to do it. The only problem with many of these things is that if you do have a desire to have an actual relationship with somebody, affectionate, romantic, you're much better off writing the book and having the sexual romantic relationship. But sometimes the only one that you can do is write a book, and that's a substitute for a baby in your mind. Maybe you'll have both agree to forego having a baby and write a book together, and that'll be the baby. So it's up to you how you choose your defenses, and but be aware of them, because if you're writing a book to have with somebody to substitute that for having a baby, you may be very disappointed at the end that you have a book and not a baby. So yeah, Alice Miller wrote a book on the trauma of the gifted child and the analyst narcissistic disturbance. They're very popular. It came out as a popular book called Prisoners of Childhood. You may have remembered it. It was a bestseller, not just for professionals, but also for the lay public. And there was one article, this was one of the articles that were very popular in the book, was the drama of the gifted child. So she was saying that analysts have a lot of deprivation in their life in terms of emotional deprivation. So what they do is they go into a profession, and they have that deprivation also is in the form of a lack of attention to them. So this profession provides the analyst, like me, an occasion where people are listening to one's words, and kind of cherish them and hang on to them. And that's okay as long as it doesn't interfere with your work with the patient. So Miller says where it interferes with your work is that these analysts who do have this deprivation and go into the work, one of their weak spots is they don't want to hear the anger from patients because that distresses them, and so they shut it out, and they don't want to hear it. They find a way to avoid it. Yeah, so that's taking a wish for attention and handling it in a work product. So all these things, if you're an analyst, you can pay attention to them. If you're astute and have good training and good therapy, you will pick up that your behavior is related to avoidance of difficult confrontations from patients. And as soon as you can realize that, sometimes you just can't do it on your own. You need to be in therapy, and most therapists, analysts have to be in therapy in order to equate themselves with these sort of blocks. But you can also do it by noticing your disturbances in the session, what you're uncomfortable with, what makes you anxious. And you can pick that up without necessarily always bringing it into therapy first, because some of them are easy and some of them are harder. Like you may have a very uncomfortable reaction to a particular person who's going to come into the therapy based on what they said about themselves over the phone. Whatever the symptom was, it could be a stressor for you. So you could become aware of that and what's that all about. At least note it, write it down, and then if you're in therapy, you can go to your therapist and discuss it, and supervisor. A lot of things we can do about the defenses of the mind, and some we just can't do because they're so thick, like denial. I think in the first video I said I gave an example of asking how their denial, how strong it was, and measure it in terms of bricks. And if it's this wide, then it's one brick. But if it's a huge wall, you've got a problem working with that person, and also that person has a problem working with themselves in order to work through the denial. It's the strongest and weakest defense, as we said before. So how about that? How about you taking yourself to task? And if you're having difficulties with whatever relationship you're with or at work, note it, write it down, and you notice a discomfort in you. Like when the ego is in danger, it sends out a signal anxiety, and that alerts you to that there's some distress that you're having. And when the worst of it is when you're having a panic attack, but they don't all have to be panic attacks. They're just distresses that you feel, and you can note them. And if you note them and pay attention to them, then you're one step ahead of yourself in trying to resolve it. So whether it's going to work and having a meeting with your boss, or going home when you haven't been home in a while, like you've been out, somebody's staying out a lot at night, and they don't come home because in addition to it's an escape from life, it's also an escape from family. So if you have uncomfortableness and you're saying, well, I just want to go out and hang with my friends for a while, and some sense of you says, well, that's not what it's all about, because in some way I don't want to be home and be dealing with the relationship issues between me and my partner. Then you can note that and write it down. What am I afraid of? What am I concerned about talking with my wife or husband? If you don't do that, you're always going to be in the void about not knowing what you could have done with the relationship, besides coming into therapy. Many people don't come into the therapy. I mean, that person who avoids going home because of the relationship issues, he could best to come to therapy and have a couples counseling, because that can help you a lot. Identify the problems, identify the things that you don't want to say because it would make you vulnerable. You can take some action. There's a lot of action you can take. We're here not talking about actions you can take on your own to note things, write them down, and then form a plan of action of your own. So if you're uncomfortable going home, and you're anxious, and you have something to say to your wife, or you feel she has something to say to you, or so write it down and say, what can I do about this? How can I avoid my avoidance? Because that's what you're doing. You're staying out and avoiding conflict. That's what the ego is for. The defenses is to help you avoid conflict, so that you don't have too much anxiety, if you have too much anger. It helps you avoid it. But on the other hand, it doesn't really help you in the long run, because it's if this is a characterological kind of set of defenses, you do them all the time, and you need to find a way out, in addition to going to therapy. So you can have two approaches to your own problems and conflicts, is to be in therapy and then also work on them. But that takes dedication and commitment, as does everything else that's worth something, right? If you want to work on your relationships. or your relationships with work, or with home, or with your children. Maybe your children are acting out a lot at home. Maybe they're acting out because of some symptom that's being exhibited between their parents, like a lot of fighting or drinking, right? So you can note that. You can note your reactions to your children and how their behavior. Is it helpful? If it's not, and note those. And that's very important, because kids often get left out of the equation in terms of how they feel about some things that are going around them. And their surround has an enormous impact right from birth. There's even before birth, whatever tensions that you have between you and your mate, if there's a lot of tension that goes into the stress hormone, cortisol, and you need to know that what's really could hurt your infant even before it was born. So we've talked about a lot about that in the videos and also on the podcast. But certain things you can do, like reduce the tension at home, not argue in front of your children, not drink and then come home and act crazy, not stay out late and then have your wife aggravated or husband aggravated because you're not paying attention to the family matters, which really matter. What is else more important? Your work, your apartment, it's your relationships, and that you can nurture. So if you haven't been nurturing your relationships by going out and having a romantic date once in a while, you have a date for everything else. Helicopter parents, they have a date for everything. But do they have a date for their loved ones at home who are caring for these children that you're sending out, having a lot of dates? But that's often forgotten. Remember the old New York Magazine cartoon, the man and woman who are in the bed together, and one is on one side and one is the other, and one has a cell phone, the other has a laptop. Great. Yeah, well, that's fine. It's nothing wrong with that, but you don't want to reduce your intimacy and confine it to a laptop and a cell phone. That's not very sexual. I was going to say something, but I won't. But anyway, make a joke. But yeah, so this is the YouTube video trying to help you see what you can do about your problems with going to therapy, and also not going to therapy. But if you can't be in therapy and you don't think it's severe, which generally that's not true, but at least you can practice on your own and do things. There are a lot of things you can do. Paying attention and observation of yourself is the big one. When your discomfort shows by anxiety, anxiousness, restlessness. As I said before, well, describe it, write it down, free associate to it. Like I said in the part one, lie down and put yourself in a position the most vulnerable you can be, and just say everything that's on your mind without restriction, and see what comes up about your anxious situation, which you're trying to avoid, or something that you would like to improve. So, this is the 60th talk, part 2, and about defenses, and I might name this how to manage your defenses. Yeah. So, Tuesday morning, right now, and we'll see you next week. If you want to contact me, you can email me at marksehl@gmail.com, or visit my site at marksehl.com. And you can also send me a note from that site too. There's a contact form there you can fill out and send it to me with a question, or if you want to make an appointment to come in and talk about some of the things that we talk about that stimulate you about your problems and you haven't been able to deal with it. So welcome to call me and or write me. Okay, so see you next time.